This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Hello, and welcome to Breaking Ground, a podcast about earth-moving machinery and characters in the industry. Both of your hosts work for Terra Cat, New Zealand's Caterpillar machinery dealer. I'm Marty Turek.
And I'm Richard Clark. In this podcast, we hear stories from a wide range of people in our industry, and today we're pleased to introduce Ian Pendle. Ian is the manager of asset operation at Terra Cat, which includes running the Terra Analytical Laboratory. Terra Analytical has been operating in Christchurch since 1973. Originally set up as a Caterpillar SOS or Scheduled Oil Sampling Lab, it has grown to become the major equipment fluid test facility in New Zealand. They test fluids such as oils, coolants, grease, diesel, filter debris and more. We're here today talking about Terra Analytical as they celebrate 50 years of supporting industry in New Zealand. Welcome, Ian. Ian, you began working at Terra in 2011. Tell us about what you did leading up to this, and going by your accent, I take it New Zealand was not originally home for you.
That's right, Richard. So originally I'm from the UK, but now I'm a proud Kiwi citizen and been here for the last 11 years with my wife and 4 children. Going back a bit further, at the age of 18, I moved away from home, and like so many young people, I went to university. I studied analytical chemistry as a degree, and after 4 years, I graduated with an honours degree in that qualification. I spent some time in the first couple of years after graduation working for Dow Corning, developing analytical techniques for pesticides in crops. And then I decided I wanted to do something slightly different, so I shifted industries and worked for DuPont for another 10 years. In that role, I was an industrial and process chemist in a manufacturing environment. That role was quite interesting because it involved working on large manufacturing facilities, and I guess that was my journey of starting to integrate machinery and analytical testing equment. Just after Millennium, I shifted roles to work for Finning in the UK. Finning is the UK Caterpillar dealership, just as Terra is the dealership in New Zealand for Caterpillar. I progressed in that position into the laboratory manager role and stayed in that role for almost 10 years. Around about the time of the earthquakes, the laboratory manager here at Terra decided he was going to retire, and so an opportunity became available, and I was approached by the senior team and asked if I'd like to move to New Zealand and do that job, which I do to some degree still to this day.
So you've had over 20 years working for Caterpillar dealers, if we put sort of the Finning time and the time that you've been here in New Zealand working for the Cat dealer here. Tell us about some of the changes that you've seen over that time in terms of your role and what it encompasses.
The two biggest changes I think I've seen, Richard, would be the increasing complexity of machines, but not only the machines, the data they generate. We now have almost instant access to some of the more sophisticated machines in terms of real-time data, and data is only the beginning of that journey of adding value to a customer. We need to take the data and translate it into information. That information becomes knowledge, and then we can give customer meaningful insights and actions to allow them to look after their assets more effectively. The second thing, which is really not unique, I don't think, to Terra, but we're seeing all the time, is a much more customer-centric approach. The bar has been lifted by all of the OEMs, whether in terms of reliable and efficiency of assets. So we differentiate ourselves, and we as in the Terra sense differentiate ourselves by really enhancing that customer journey, the purchasing journey, because that's an important element that we believe is something that we offer that perhaps others don't.
So just taking a step back for a minute, Ian, for your sort of journey. So tell us a little bit about Terra Analytical. So how many people make up the Terra Analytical team, and how have they sort of contributed to Terra Analytical's continued success?
Yeah, thanks, Marty. We have a team of 14, which is quite an achievement when you consider we probably increased 100-fold over the last 50 years. and we've only increased our team by sort of a factor of 5. So we've built in some efficiencies there over that 50-year period. And I think the way they've contributed to the team is that this Caterpillar world is quite unique in the way that all these dealerships around the world have these laboratories, just the same as the one here in New Zealand. But we do get a lot of people coming from overseas and coming to New Zealand. So our knowledge isn't just based around what happens in New Zealand. It's based around this entire network of people around the globe. And that gives us real strength in terms of exposure to different industries and all those kind of things. We also have a very strong, cohesive and collaborative team. So the way I often describe it to my team, and I think hopefully it'll make sense to the listeners, is that I like to create an environment where there's a divergence of thought, but a convergence of action. So when we're looking at a problem, we're trying to identify, let's make sure we capture everything. Let's consider it all, and then our job is to bundle that down and make it into something that the customer can really understand. And that way we ensure we've really considered all the possibilities before we just go back with a sort of shooting from the hip kind of response.
And I can imagine that's really important when we're talking about data and utilising that data correctly to get the best outcome. So just for those listeners that don't really know much about SOS or schedule or something, can you just sort of explain briefly the sort of process and the advantages that SOS can have and can provide for service maintenance?
Yeah, clearly SOS is quite a technologically advanced sort of field. There's a lot of detail you could go into. But when I'm out with friends or with people who don't necessarily understand the industry intimately, I describe it as like going to the doctors and taking a blood sample. So our service technicians go out to a machine, they will take an oil sample, just as your doctor would take the blood, and they'll run a series of tests on that, and then we will come back, just as the doctor would come back to you, and he would say, yeah, you're all good, or actually, we think you might want to just take these other tests or whatever. So the simplest analogy is trying to pick up these indicators of a possible issue further down the road, to prevent it from turning into something that's going to be far more catastrophic or costly. So if we can pick up those things, we can often, again, a repair on a machine that might, as a result of failure, cost $50,000. We could typically service that work in no inconvenience to the owner, and maybe it cost $5,000 or $10,000. Still quite a amount of money, but nowhere near as expensive as the catastrophic failure.
And I suppose just like going to the doctor, you do your annual checkup or everything like that. It's no different. It's got to be sort of routine, and you can build those trends in that as well.
Exactly right. And if you were to go to your doctors and he would take a test and he'd tell you a value, it would have much more meaning if you knew the last result was way higher or way lower. And we use the same approach and methodology in our laboratory. So we normally ask for 3 samples to get a trend of any particular result, and then we can say whether it's stable, it's going up, it's going down, and again that then tells us to be whether or not we can the customer needs to take action, or whether we just have a wait and watch policy, pretty much again like your GP.
Yeah, it's a really interesting process, and I always enjoy talking to customers, and I was actually talking to one at the rugby in the weekend who was fully on board with this process, and he's come on board over a period of time. And totally, I suppose, so positive about the result that this process gives him in terms of his business. And I suppose prior to dealing with us, he didn't understand or have anything to do with this type of like as you say, essentially taking a health sample from yourself, and he's doing it with all his machines and getting some fantastic results. So yeah, great to understand that from your side. And I suppose with you talked about 20 years in from a Caterpillar perspective, you would have seen a lot of evolution from a technology perspective. Tell us about how the lab has evolved to stay ahead of the curve in that space with regards to technology and industry best practices.
I think I touched upon it before. This industry is not a cheap one to be in. The cost of entry into the fluid analysis market or any laboratory nowadays is very expensive. But fortunately, the TerraCat business and leadership team have always realised the unique service we provide to our customer base, and so has always strongly supported investment in the latest equipment for the analytical business unit, especially in regard to automation. We talked around some of those numbers before around how many samples we processed with a certain number of people. Well, automation has been a key part of that growth. So as a recognition of the value we provide to the customers, and following that up with actual hard dollars to ensure we do stay ahead and provide the best quality results. So talking about quality, we've also a laboratory that's ISO 9001 accredited. Now what that means in its simplest form is that we have an external auditor who's independent. He comes in annually and assesses all of our systems and processes and everything else, just to ensure that we're doing everything right and to the appropriate standard, which gives customers a reassurance that they are getting the best quality of work. And we've been doing that since 1996. So we were the first accredited laboratory. So again, I think that speaks to the organisation's pedigree in terms of quality of service that we provide. To that point, again, I talked about the investment from the business. We're in a very fortunate position to be moving to a new laboratory next year, a purpose-built laboratory, and that's something that will enable us to double our future capacity. We've almost been a victim of our own success.
Yeah, that'll certainly future-proof you for hopefully the next 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years, won't it?
Exactly right. No, that we will, and certainly there's significant growth plans for the future, and the investment in the new facility is a key part of that.
So, sort of discussing around, obviously there's challenges around how much volume you guys can put through and things like that, but other challenges. So what are some of the biggest challenges the lab's faced over the last sort of 50 years, and how have you guys or Terra Analytical overcome these challenges?
Well, other than the size of the laboratory, which I just mentioned, we've kind of grown to twice the original design capacity of the lab in terms of the throughput of samples we have. And I'm loath to mention it, but we're all aware of the impact across the world of the COVID pandemic. Now, one of the things about our equipment is there aren't many scientific equipment manufacturers in our industry in New Zealand, so we purchase our equipment from overseas, and the service engineers were mostly serviced out of Australia. So during the COVID times, we couldn't get service engineers here. So again, we've talked about our quality and to ensure that the results are accurate. We actually had a workaround in that we employed local engineers based in Christchurch who were trained up virtually over the web. So they then received the qualifications and came into the lab. So we were quite proud of the way, again, the team sort of thought, right, here's the problem we've got with COVID. We can't get people in. And I'm talking about a period of 12 to 18 months here. We couldn't get engineers in. But we did then work with these local engineers, many of whom still work and support us today through agreements with those overseas service providers. So it's actually brought more money into New Zealand through local engineers. The other thing I'd say we had to do because of the COVID, we had to outsource some of our testing temporarily. Some of the equipment, the breakdowns was so severe, we couldn't get the parts, we couldn't get the engineers. And so actually we spoke to other laboratories, not in the oil industry, but other laboratories with the equipment, and they processed samples for us as well. And it's very not really nice touch to the story, because one of those equipment suppliers actually recently had a breakdown, and we reciprocated the agreement, and they sent samples to us to process for them. So again, it was a nice collaborative solution to a challenging problem.
So yeah, a few challenges, particularly through that COVID period. What about the highlights? You guys have just celebrated 50 years. There must be some pretty cool things that have happened over that time. Tell us a bit about those.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I knew you were going to ask me that question, so I right, 50 years is a long time, and there's bound to be some highlights, but I'd like to look at it in a slightly different way. Sure, there's big things happen, and there's big contracts we win, and there's milestones for a lot of different people. But I think if you ask my team what are the highlights, I would say every time a customer phones up and says, "Thank you for saving me my machine, thank you for that $10,000, or I really appreciate you guys going into the laboratory on a Saturday to be able to get the results to me in good time." I think we have lots of little highlights every day that's so easy to overlook. We so often focus on the big things, but it's actually the small things day in, day out that really translate into a valuable customer experience. So that's one thing. I'd also say, again, it's on a similar theme, but I mentioned earlier that we have a team that have got a lot of years of experience. So every time we recognise somebody with 5, 10 or 15 years of service, that's a real highlight in that person's career with the organisation. And there's quite a few of them. So, what I'm trying to say is, I guess the highlight is throughout the team. It's not just by these individual events. It's actually the way we work cohesively together. So for me, that's my highlight, would be the way we work together as a team.
It definitely comes back to what you're saying there about the people, whether they be the customers or the team members within Terra Analytical. It's always nice to be able to acknowledge that and certainly get acknowledgement back from a customer perspective, whether they're the biggest customer that we deal with or those on the smaller side.
That's right. They all value our contribution, right? And we certainly value their feedback.
So with that sort of in mind, looking at Terra Cap, what's the sort of role that Terra Analytical plays in Terra Cat's success? We've sort of got almost like two separate organisations that are helping each other there.
Well, you've always answered the question, Marta. We do have two organisations that help each other, but I think we are unique, well, in New Zealand at least, is that we are the only laboratory closely connected with an OEM. So when we're looking at customers' machines, it's not just the experience of the local team that we can call upon. We can also draw upon this vast global network of other laboratories, the head team in Peoria, Caterpillar's head team. And so we understand the machine much better than anyone else. We know the things we need to do to ensure we can give some really deep insights into customers. And that's where we really add value. And that's ultimately what you get with the CAP brand. You get that unique insight into how that machine operates. We've been going for 50 years. Caterpillar's been going for a good deal longer, and there's a reason why it's still successful and the leading OEM today. It's because of that vast knowledge and experience we have within the global network.
And in terms of partnerships, this partnership with Caterpillar, but there's a really key partnership locally here that I'd like you to talk about in a bit of detail. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? I won't sort of say too much more, and I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I can assume you're only talking about Kilmarnock Enterprise.
I am.
And it is a pretty special relationship we have with Kilmarnock. Kilmarnock are a Christchurch-based social enterprise creating employment and development opportunities for Kiwis with intellectual disabilities. And they're very close to our hearts. We first set out our relationship with Kilmarnock about 15 years ago, but over the last sort of 10 years, we've taken some of their team, and we've had the first outplacement employees of theirs into our laboratory. So there's 2 or 3 guys coming regularly every day, and they just help with the behind the scenes kind of things, just to ensure that the lab moves smoothly and allowing some of our more qualified team members to focus on what they do best as well. And then I think what the Kilmarnock team bring is not only do they bring a much valued resource, but it also highlights one of our core company values, which is care. And there really is a sense the whole team cares and works together as one. I think if you were to speak to the Kilmarnock team, the 2 outsourced people are regarded as being very, very lucky, and most people at Kilmarnock want a placement at Terra. It's considered to be the job to have at Kilmarnock. So we're really proud that those people come to work every day and are an absolute integral part of our team.
Yeah, it sounds like a really rewarding partnership, both from, I suppose, your perspective with the lab and also for the people that are involved with working with you.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine it's a relationship that's going to continue long into the future as well. So just with looking towards the future, how do you see the future looking at Terra Analytical? And obviously we spoke about the new facilities and that, but is anything exciting in your world coming up to look forward to as well?
Well, I'm going to go back a little bit to the thing I first started talking about, which was about this data being generated by machines and automation. And we can't hide from reality. The world is changing, but I think it's going to be really exciting. We've had a fairly stable industry for almost 50 years. Automation's increased, but the techniques in the laboratory are essentially the same. But what we're now seeing is this development of onboard sensor technologies on the machines, and that's likely to become a disruptor to the industry. So we need to understand that really well and adapt very, very quickly. So that is really exciting. But I think the challenge is going to be finding a way to take all of that data, as I said before, turning it into information And that will drive our understanding and knowledge and be able to help our customers make those informed decisions. So it's a bit of an uncertain world, but I think if we embrace the change, change is a 50-50 mix of fear and opportunity. I think we have to try and compartmentalize the fear and build on the opportunity here. It is unique. Everybody faces the same challenge. So if we go into it with open eyes, we can be here for another 50 years. I have no doubt about that at all.
So Ian, I suppose with the demands of running a busy lab, what are some of the things you do to switch off away from Terra Analytical?
I think if you spoke to my wife, she would say I didn't switch off, actually. but that aside,
I'm sure there must be a few hours each day or each week that you do.
Yeah, so I'm certainly an avid cyclist. I one of the reasons we originally said yes to coming to New Zealand was the job for sure. But it's a great place. The Port Hills are a fantastic backdrop. It's only 10 minutes from my house. The ski fields are so close, so there's sort of the skiing and skiing in the winter, cycling in the summer. And the other thing I would say I do when I do have some spare time is I use my working knowledge of chemistry in my microbrewery, and I brew my own beer at home. So that's something I really enjoy doing. It's a kind of mixture of work and pleasure, running my own brewery.
I was going to say that they're a little bit connected, aren't they, in terms of what you're doing?
They are indeed. And as I say, I can assure you, if you were to ask friends, they would probably say the quality of the final product was acceptable, at least.
I was going to say, how's the 2023 vintage looking to be got together? Is that looking good?
I don't think we've got any left.
So very good then. Well, look, Ian, thank you very much for coming on Breaking Ground today. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to share some of the great work that the team at Terra, and more specifically Terra Analytical, have been involved in. It's been nice to give an opportunity to share that with the listeners.
And thank you so much to our listeners. We hope you've really enjoyed today's conversation. And if you'd like to know any more about Terra Analytical, head over to their website.
Yeah, as usual, we'd love your feedback on this episode, so don't be shy to go online and give us a like or a follow. Or to get in touch with us, you can send us a message on any of our TerraCat social media channels. And finally, please keep an eye on our TerraCat Facebook page for details about the next month's episode of Breaking Ground. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.